letting the jaw be soft. Noticing if you're holding your shoulders any further up or further forward than they need to be. Just noticing what it feels like to hold your shoulders in that position. Noticing if you're gripping at all in your belly. Or in your thighs or buttocks. Awareness through the whole space of the body. Movement of the breath. So, in your own time, I suggest sitting out of meditation posture. We'll do a longer meditation shortly, but I'm going to say a few things before then. Are we online now? Is that happening? Great, well done. And welcome if you're joining us online. Okay. All right. So, as Kuslasara mentioned, we've been exploring. This is our fourth, I think, in a series, fourth out of 5, exploring what we've called the sublime ideal. So it's in a way what we've been doing, and this evening should completely stand alone. I say will, hopefully. Should completely stand alone, but you can know that we've been exploring different aspects of the Mahayana. So the Mahayana is a sort of major development in Buddhism that happened a few hundred years after the life of the Buddha. And there's lots of different aspects of it. It's a broad term that encompasses a whole load of the Buddhist tradition. But the main thing is that the emphasis in the way that the Buddhist teachings is being communicated is that the vision gets more cosmic, basically. There's a real emphasis on taking off any kind of limitation, any perceived, and mostly these are kind of corrections to ways in which people had sort of stagnated in their practice rather than a limitation in the Buddha's original teaching. But the Mahayana was sort of taking an approach where everything was limitless in a way. So there's a real emphasis on sort of like the sutras that the Mahayana is sort of based around are sort of set in amongst like millions of beings and sort of worlds that sort of expand beyond the reach of the imagination, basically. So there's a real emphasis on the infinite, the eternal, and kind of stretching our imagination with it to conceive of a vision of a life lived in line with the truth that is vast. So it's not just it's not a corrective to our life. It's not something that we can sort of do and then be done and then settle down. It's something much, much vaster than that, including in its central goals. So the central central figure of the Mahayana is the Bodhisattva, who is one who is sort of moving towards enlightenment, but not just enlightenment for the benefit of all beings, expressly for the benefit of all beings. So the idea being that the Bodhisattva is doing this, trying to do this most difficult of things, overcoming all the obstacles that hold us back as a living being, and in doing so that they can then communicate and help others to do the same, basically. So huge goal. And we've been talking about that coming with this sense of a kind of resonating with life, and one's life being lived out in relation to that and trying to sort of help from that. And last week we were talking about how one might cultivate that, how one might cultivate a kind of longing towards that. The word we used was bodhicitta, a kind of a longing, a will, a drive that's sort of driving us on, calling us on to live in that way, how we might cultivate that. So there's some of the different aspects of what we've been exploring. And tonight I'm going to talk a bit more about eternity. I'll say more about eternity, but we're going to talk about eternity, and we're going to talk about it in relation to time. So in relation to, and our lives as we know them are lived out in time. So how can we relate to the concept of eternity, the sort of a vision of something outside of time? So I'll read a poem. It's a poem written by Sangharakshita, who's the founder of our tradition that we're a part of. I'll just read it and you'll get the picture. The past is in the mind, the future too. Life is a dream, a cloud, a drop of dew. The present is and isn't. It comes but to depart. Only eternity can glut the heart. So I'll read that again in a moment, but you've got these sort of two themes within it. One, you've got a theme to do with impermanence, which is time, basically. So these images are very traditional. You'll hear them throughout the Buddhist tradition. Seeing life as a dream, as a cloud, as a drop of dew. A drop of dew is something that's or a cloud, it's so sort of ephemeral. It's there but for a moment and then it's gone. If you stare at a cloud for long enough, what you think is the cloud of a particular sort of shape is suddenly something else, and it's somewhere different. And there's this reflection that sees life as something changeable, unpin-downable. So you've got time in that sense, time seen as something changing. And he says, but only eternity can glut the heart. So to glut, I looked it up. So it's sort of related to gluttony, this idea of sort of eating until you're full. So basically, only eternity can fully satisfy the heart. Get to the point. You ever have this sense that there's this kind of, you might have it when it's like 1:30 in the morning and you're still watching YouTube videos or something like that. You're there's an itch you're trying to scratch and you can't quite get there. There's a sense that there's something that's kind of pulling us on to the next thing, but it's not quite satisfying. It's not quite satisfying to the point where we're like, oh good, I'm done. Like after a big meal where you're sort of full and sated. You don't quite get there. And I think that's true. That's true for quite a lot of our experience. I remember when I was quite young, I've sort of reflected back on this since I've become a Buddhist. But I can remember exactly where I was as a teenager, sort of getting out of my parents' car, having this reflection that I keep thinking that I'll be happy when I get this thing, and then there's a few times where I've then got that thing. And then there's another thing that I'll be happy when I get that, and just it was like a first recognition of the fact of that phenomena, of the fact that I'm sort of moving towards something. There's something I'm trying to reach. It's a career goal. That part, that having that person love you back, or a certain amount of money, or whatever it is. There's something that we're kind of aiming ourselves towards, with the kind of subconscious assumption that, oh yeah, that'll be it, then I'll be happy. And just recognising that didn't seem to happen. It's as though we're sort of built from desire. We move through the world based on wanting something. Everything we do is because, okay, I want to achieve a certain goal or outcome for that, for me, sometimes for others, but we're wanting something all the time. It's just that very often that gets hooked onto something that can't satisfy it. It's as though we've got this kind of longing for the eternal, to use this language, the longing for something that can glut the heart, that can finally satisfy. We're sort of pulling towards that, but we don't quite know that we're doing that. We don't quite know that's what we're aiming for, that is what will satisfy. So we sort of hook that hope onto something a bit nearer, like that promotion, like that partner, whatever it is. And in a way, lucky if we do get that. One of the main reasons we're lucky if we do get that thing is because it can point out to us that it doesn't work like that. We can sort of unhook our desire from that and hopefully sort of recognise that there's something more that we're reaching for. Does anyone have a sense? Nod your head or shake your head. Do you have a sense of something of that in life? I think for me that's a big part of why I've sort of ended up practicing Buddhism. Kept coming here, this sense of like there was a finger pointing towards whatever that is, distant though it may seem. And those moments where we can feel that we've got a slightly bigger moments where we can sort of have a slightly bigger perspective. I went to see the Lee Miller exhibition yesterday at the Tate, Britain, which is really excellent actually. There's something about, seeing, I think the arts can do this, there's a number of things can do this, spending time in nature can, but just give us a sense of a much bigger perspective. So I was looking at all these different pictures, some are, from, messing around in hotel rooms with lovers when you're in your early 20s to like really sort of surreal kind of images of chairs at angles and so on, all the way to the pictures from Dachau concentration camp immediately after it was liberated. So this whole sort of spectrum of human life seen with a really interesting eye, as a photographer can do. And it's like something about seeing all of that together. It's like I'm suddenly taken a whole step back out of my own life into something a bit bigger. And whatever that is feels a little bit closer to this eternal. Do you have a sense of what I mean? It's like we kind of knocked out of our more narrow perspective into something much broader. And I can feel a bit like, there's a bit more space in my life or something. Or I sort of have a sense of my life wanting to be more and more about whatever that is. That's where I can feel like I can rest a bit more easy. I don't feel like I need to reach for my phone quite as quickly because I'm a bit more satisfied, a bit more glutted, to use that word, that people don't seem to use anymore at all, actually, apart from Bante in these poems. Anyway, so what I'll say more about, we'll talk a lot more about time and eternity and how that relates to what this sort of profound and unpin-downable thing that is trying to practice Buddhism in the second half, after we've had some tea, that is. But before that, we'll do a little bit of a longer period of meditation. We'll do the mindfulness of breathing practice. And for those of you who haven't done this practice before, it's quite simple, and I'll ring a bell. There's 4 stages. We're basically just watching the breath as we were doing at the end of the practice we did just then. There's 4 stages, and I'll just remind us of what they are as they come. But what I'd suggest, especially if you've not, if you've done the practice before, then let's have a particular sort of focus for it. So we'll just paying attention while you're doing the practice to the fact that the breath is changing, to the in a way just like life being a cloud, a dream, a cloud, a drop of dew. Just noticing how that's true in our experience right here, and the breath is a very clear kind of clue to that, because the breath's changing all the time. So you could, just have that lightly as a reflection that you can explore a bit as you're getting into doing the mindfulness of breathing together, and we'll speak for a moment at the end about what you notice in doing that. So let's set up for meditation. I'll read the poem again as we start. So taking a moment to find your posture again. The weight dropping down and the spine rising up. Filling the whole body with awareness. past is in the mind, the future too. Life is a dream, a cloud, a drop of dew. The present is and isn't. It comes but to depart. Only eternity can glut the heart. Mindfulness of breathing. Placing a number at the end of the out breath. So breathing in, breathing out, 1. Breathing in, breathing out, 2. All the way to 10 and back again at 1. Not trying to change your breath, just however it's coming. beginning of the in-breath. 1, breathing in, breathing out. 2 as you breathe in, so on.
letting go of the counting. Just experiencing the whole of the breath in the whole of the body. You might notice changingness. maintaining a broad awareness of the breath and the body, but finding a point of focus where the breath enters and leaves the body, perhaps around the nose or the mouth, just looking for a single subtle sensation, resting your awareness there. Now, no longer making any effort to follow the breath or notice change. Just sitting still for a moment longer with a broad awareness of your experience.
So we have just a few minutes before we go next door and get some tea, but I'd be interested, anything you noticed from that meditation, particularly in relation to noticing change in your experience? What effect did that have on your experience? Did anyone notice anything? Or how did you find it generally?
Made me more acutely aware of my mind wandering off.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, one thing that we can is the breath is changing, but also you can see that the mind is changing as well. The mind's on one thing, the mind's saying, okay, watching the breath, and then suddenly we're somewhere else, and then that's gone as well, and then maybe we think about something else. So we can notice it on all these different levels. Yeah. Okay. What else?
When you focus your breath at your nostrils, you can notice how much richness and nuance there really is in that sensation, which you usually don't notice.
Yeah. So the whole practice is taking us into more and more refined awareness that, and yeah, we're just watching just the changing sensations in this very small area. So that can be there's a delicacy and a sort of beauty to that. Right. What else? Anyone noticing the effects of, particularly if you're used to doing mindfulness of breathing, having this other lens of looking at change? What else did that have? Yeah.
Starting with tension in my left hand.
Mm-hmm.
First I noticed that, then it moved into pain in the right hip, and then that kind of eased off at the background. Then I started noticing towards the end like a streaming of cold air from this colder air towards warmer from this side of the room. So bodily sensation.
And noticing how one thing that, like a pain in your hip or something, for what can seem like something really solid, can't it? But when you if you stay with it, you're noticing, oh, now it's something over here, now it's there, and the kind of, so at any one moment it feels like it feels like a problem, but if you stay with the problem for long enough, it will shift.
Yeah, the hand disappeared somewhere, the tension, I don't know where.
Yeah, great. Good. Yeah, I think it's it's a mysterious little kind of window, looking at our experience in this way. It's probably something that benefits from a bit more time and a bit more of a kind of sort of stiller conditions than we can get here. But in a way, it's one of the ways that the Buddha sort of pointed us. One of the things the Buddha sort of pointed out that we can pay attention to, and that's not just so that we can. It's not just as a fact in itself. We're not just noticing impermanence just so that we face up to the fact that things come and go and change and aren't as permanent as we might think they are, and so on. That there's something beneficial in that, but there's something a little bit more mysterious about the fact that it's almost like by noticing change, in a way you could say by noticing time, if you like, is change in a certain sense. It's a movement. By noticing that and looking at our experience with that perspective, it's almost though it can, that is a larger perspective on our experience and can kind of open up a bit of a window to something almost outside of that picture, almost beyond that picture. By really, really noticing time in the form of impermanence, there's a chance that we might get a sort of waft of eternity, or even a good old whack of it in the right in a certain moment. But it's a sort of it's counterintuitive, isn't it? It's like really looking at time, and then something else might come in, something beyond time might come into the picture. So that's, in a way, that's one of the things that reflection can do, even if that's just a sense of like, oh yeah, I'm just realising that this pain in my hip that I thought was bothering me is actually not as solid as all that. There's a loosening and a broadening perspective that's happening in small degrees all the way to something much more perspective altering. Okay, let's go next door and we'll have a cup of tea, and after we come back, I'll say a little bit more. Was it a hiking? No, I don't know what the form is. It's quite short. It's 2 4 long, short. A hike is 3 lines.
Oh, 3 lines. Oh, yeah, I like that one. I've never heard of it before.
Yeah. It's not what I think I've come across before, but certainly in the index.
I've got some in my bag actually. Bag.
actually quite cheap for eBay stuff like that. Yeah, so I've got a 100 gram bag.
Then that was, I think that was cheaper than one I got. I love it. I had a terrible experience with eBay. I've never done something like one. And I was just, I tried to do like, I go up and like an astrologer chart. And it came from India. And they wanted me to pay £55. And it actually said like it was coming. It led me to believe it's coming from you. And then it arrived. It was all the wrong way round. All the stars were the wrong way round. And like not because it's meant to be like so as you can use it. Because I like astrology, so I wanted to do it to use it scientifically. It was not, it didn't match up. The degrees, it has to be like the degrees has to be completely correct. Completely wrong. It was bullshit. It said it was like a piece of time. And then in the end, like, actually, even now, every now and then they call me, and this was like, you know how many months ago that was? They call me saying, we want it back, what's that like, and I've got, I don't know what to do with it. God knows. I just ignored them. Because it ain't like, we pay high protection, so they can see me. And he said, there's no way I would agree to it unless it said that. So then I and then it ended up after me, one of the delivery companies oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, they just kept coming after me. In the end, I had to, it was a bit of I was a bit worried because they ended up sending me letters saying they were going to take legal action against me. The delivery company, I was being like, something like that. And in the end, I did sort it out, but it was a headache, and I was thinking, should I just pay it so as to not, you know, I don't want to bad credit money to them. Yeah, that's what it is, and I think that's what it actually that is what it was. And now I don't trust that. It's only made my protection, but it should have been maybe I should give it another go then. Yeah. leaving on Thursday and going back to America to see his family. So who knows when they're going to go in the future. I don't know if I can be bothered to like make my kids a moving person. I know that I've got on top of like the things in my life that I know is working for. And now it's like yeah.
feeling kind of beauty. And it's just really, it's so important that whatever we do when we're working on our minds, so we come here, meditate, we might learn about Buddhist ethics, if you're supposed to be doing the intro courses, we learn about Buddhist ethics, and we're trying to sort of build up a regular meditation practice in that, okay, like, how am I going to do that every morning? Sit on a cushion on my own before work. Just building up the nuts and bolts of our practice, thinking about how we behave, how we think about ourselves, how we think about our other people. So all of that is really good, but without vision, without something bigger than the nuts and bolts of those practices, then it's just a sort of wholesome, fairly wholesome self-improvement project. Does that make sense? So, and it will run out of interest without vision. If we only have vision, our heads are in the clouds all the time. So you might only go to inspiring talks, come back from an inspiring talk, and then just forget the content of it the next day. Yeah? So we need the nuts and bolts of practice actually be motivated to sit on our cushion. But to be motivated, we need to know why. And I'm co-leading the winter retreat this year, and it's really, I've been emphasising this more and more. Retreat conditions are the ideal way to bring vision and the nuts and bolts of practice together. And on a retreat, you're sitting down in front of a shrine like we do here. In the afternoon, if you've got free time, you go for a walk in the countryside. The retreat that we're running at Sthiramanas has a beautiful, a barrier around, sort of surrounded by this mandala of flower beds. So everything around the building is sacred. So you can have this sacred experience framed by beauty. It's the beauty of the surroundings, the beauty of the Buddha's teachings, the beauty of the shrine, the beauty of being with other people. And we're looking at the nuts and bolts of, okay, now we're sitting, what attitude do we bring to our mind? How can we create more loving kindness? How can we, in each moment, look at our minds, look at how we interact, look at what we do that's positive, and move away from things that block us. So vision and nuts and bolts of practice come together, and then on retreat they're not separate. They're not one doesn't kind of overarch the other, because you've got a program, you've got a whole framework that brings them together. So there are a few places. There's not many places actually. There are a few places left on the retreat. If you're thinking about it, if you like the sound of both vision and nuts and bolts of practice come together, then do join me on the retreat. There's a few places. I think there's a few 10-day places and a few 5-day the first half. Yeah, so be quick because those are. And if you can't do that, then you can look forward in the new year. Straight away in January, we're starting the meditation challenge. So that will help you start the new year with a lot of support on the meditation practice. Okay, so next spring, look out for a painting. In the meantime, engage with vision in whatever way you can, hopefully that will help us.
It's only on Monday. Like you can't. You like this. It's different things every day of the week. So I've got to get in there.
trying to be slightly
throwing myself into it.
Right, we'll just pause. We'll just sit quietly for a moment while we wait for the last few people to arrive. Okay. So, yes, before we paused, I was talking about we were talking about time and eternity, and that's our main theme. I'll just come in, Andrew. Yeah. Good. Welcome back. Yeah, I'll just pause just a moment. Okay, so there's I think maybe 3 overlapping pairs of terms that we're gonna explore, and you'll see hopefully become clear how they all fit together. What I've got to say now is sort of it's in a way something very, very simple, but conceptually a little bit tricky, quite subtle. But hopefully in doing so, it will be looking into a kind of paradox that can trip us up when we start trying to develop in any particular direction, particularly in the direction of the eternal. So hopefully something will kind of clarify in doing so, and with the sort of the practical aspects of that hopefully should become evident through it as well. But we've been talking about this pair of terms, time and eternity. That should be fairly clear from what we've said before. We'll also be talking about the path and the goal. So Buddhism, in a way, that's one way that you could just break down the whole of what the Buddhist tradition is. The Buddhist tradition is a path and a goal, and quite simple. There's a path. There's a number of things we do. It's a path that we walk, a particular way of applying ourselves, of practicing, that is leading in a particular direction, and that's the direction of the goal that we're aiming for. And the goal is Buddhahood. The goal is enlightenment. The goal sort of emerges from the Buddha realizing it and then communicating a path that then leads up to it. Yeah? So in a way, everything that we're doing is trying to, by practicing Buddhism, is trying to move along a path towards something that we're aiming for or feel drawn on towards. So yeah, the path and the goal, and also I've been talking about the bodhisattva. We talked about the term the bodhisattva. So the bodhisattva being this being sort of set on enlightenment. And sometimes you'll hear the term Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and I think for a long time when I was coming here, I'd sort of think, why are there 2 terms? They seem to be bundled together quite a lot. And if we talk about the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, what's the difference, and why are we talking about 2 different things? And they seem pretty similar from the way we're talking about it. So hopefully that will get a little bit clearer as well. So time and eternity, the path and the goal, and the Buddha and Bodhisattva. So, the path and the goal. So we're moving along a path of practice, and we're aiming for a goal. So the point here is that the path is something that we follow in time. Yeah. So the path is followed in time, but the goal is attained outside of time. So there's a paradox in that, and that's where we're going to be looking. So the path is followed in time, and the goal is attained out of time. So let's take the path first, and then we'll look at the goal, and then we'll see how they kind of join together, if at all. So so the path and time. So we're treading up by practicing. Practicing anything. I'm learning to play the piano. I know that I can't currently play, a Mozart sonata, much as I'd like to. But I can learn some scales, and then I can practice an easy piece. And there's a bunch of different skills that I'm trying to put together. And it turns out when you're in your mid-30s and start learning the instrument, it takes quite a long time. But there's something satisfying about the act of sort of doing that. I'm really enjoying it. But I have a sense that I'm trying to go somewhere. I'm trying to be able to play more beautiful music than I currently can, and I'm trying to move towards that. So there's a sense of like, by doing one thing, by putting certain conditions in place, by practicing my scales, I create the conditions for me to be able to navigate the keyboard more easily. And then that means that I can play more complex pieces. And there's a sort of sequence of events. So very much there's a kind of an evolution which happens in time. There's a sense of progress. Yeah. So in a way, the Bodhisattva is a kind of the Bodhisattva is one who's sort of set out towards this goal of enlightenment. So there's the sense of this kind of dynamic process of a Bodhisattva in a way is like the ideal Buddhist. It's someone who's just really ardently trying to practice, trying to sort of has this urge to kind of evolve and become more than they currently are, and he's just trying to develop and develop and develop and develop. And this is described in terms of practicing perfections. I'm not going to list what they all are, but these various different. I know how you feel. I'm going to keep coughing as well myself. We can bounce off each other. It's all right. No, I won't feel as bad doing it now. These sort of perfecting certain qualities, like generosity, isn't just something we do once. It's something that we can get more and more and more generous. We can be generous in ways that we currently can't possibly imagine. We can develop that quality more and more and more strongly through practicing it. Yeah? So there's a sense that there's a path of perfecting these spiritual qualities more and more. And the Bodhisattva is said to do that over many, many lifetimes. The Mahayana really labours this point. It will take many hundreds of thousands of kalpas often for a bodhisattva to become a Buddha, to become fully enlightened. The idea, and a kalpa, just to give you a sense of that, one description of a kalpa that I really like is like you've got a mountain, and at the end of every 1,000 years, or maybe it's 100 years, okay, we'll call it every 100 years. At the end of every 100 years, something comes that flies over the top of this mountain holding a silk handkerchief and rubs the silk handkerchief along the top of the mountain. Nothing for 100 years, then the same thing happens again. And the kalpa is the length of time it takes to wear the entire mountain away. So that's a long time, and then there's like thousands of those. So you have this sense of impossible amount of time that is spent perfecting and developing. So this sense of something almost limitless, but can get more and more and more and more. So not a sense of, having some insight and then sort of settling down and being done with all this practice. So let's take the opportunity just to get into pairs or threes, and just explore this idea of following a path. So do you feel that some of you might some of you have been practicing Buddhism for a little while and might feel that you're on a path. Some of you might, it might be your first time here tonight. Do you have a sense that you're on a particular path, or any path in general in your life that's sort of aiming towards something? And where is it? Where is it aiming? Is that clear? So yeah, how do you feel about the idea of walking a path? Do you feel you're walking a path, and where is it pointing? So let's get into pairs or threes, and I'll hear back from a few of you about that. Take one more minute to make sure you both have a chance to say something.
Why?
good to hear. It'd be good to hear back from you. But actually, I think rather than, I think the thing I'm most interested in hearing about is how do you respond to this idea of a path? Like, is that something that you like the sense of thinking of yourself in that way, or do you have some resistance to it? What's going on there? How do you respond to this idea of walking on a path? Anyone want to say? Got anything to share on that? Yeah.
I always think of labyrinths when people talk of a path, and you're reminded of a labyrinth every time you go on the tube. They always have, every station has a labyrinth there.
Right, yeah.
And it's a sense that you might not quite know where you're going, but there's only one route for a labyrinth, which is the distinction between a labyrinth and a maze. So you're on a path, but you don't always know which turn you're going to make, but you're always heading one way and coming from another way.
Yeah. So you don't quite know where, what it implies is you don't quite know where it's going. You're sort of following it.
And you trust.
You trust that. So this is assuming, obviously, if we're, say, in the context of practicing the Dharma, this assumes that we're really reading the map of the Buddha's teachings and saying, that's communicating, okay, so this is the direction you're heading in. Because, we might have to make some decisions as to which direction we're going, but hopefully if we're responding clearly enough to the teaching, it should be quite clear. The principles are quite clear, but we don't know where it's going to take us. There's an unknowable kind of quality to that. Yeah, great.
Our people were saying, we were three, both of them said in different ways that actually, although you might know the principles and you're on a path, you don't actually know the path. You don't know what the end point is, but you do have an intuition, don't you, that where the next step is going to. Here we are. Where's the next step? And both of them had ways of talking. You said it's joyful, and I can't remember what you said.
That's fine. No, actually, I just completed the journey in the guide, and they have these. They do a lot of in dynamic talk. They do a lot of exercises. So every day you've got to do a generous thing, or engage with imagination, or do sort of practical things, ways about following Buddhahood. But I find that when the course ended, I kind of lost that connection with people, that expansiveness. Kind of, I was left to my own devices. And it was kind of, there's when they're talking about spiritual death and things like that, I try to maintain doing these things, being generous and being dynamic and active, proactive. But basically, I just I feel like when I do these things, I notice a difference in transcendence and not transcendence. I notice a difference in. I can access different. I'm not in my head so much. I'm sort of accessing different consciousness at times.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're having this experience of there's a path being laid out for you, and a course is great for that. Here are the conditions. It's saying you can do this, and then why don't you try and do that? And why don't you try and do that? And then noticing as you go, this seems to make some tangible difference. And then hopefully what that means is that we can then trust the path that we're walking on a little bit more and be like, if they said that that's the next step and that kind of worked, then maybe I'll take this next one. It's like we can see a little bit ahead of ourselves, just a little bit, to know that I think probably what I need to work on is this, or somebody suggested, why don't I try and do this thing next? We don't necessarily know what's a few steps ahead of that, but hopefully we can build up that trust that we're moving in that particular direction. Maybe one more sense of did anybody have anybody not like the language of the path? Yeah.
I didn't mind the path language, but I didn't like the idea that it takes several thousands lifetimes.
Yeah.
Kind of impatient.
Yeah, right. So it's in a way with all of these things. It's just a word. It's a point of language. A word is just pointing at something, so we need to be able to relate to the language as a metaphor. Where's it helpful? Where's it not? And the language of the path is very helpful in the sense that it's pointing out that we are trying to progress from where we are now to somewhere more expansive, somewhere with where our qualities are sort of manifested more. There's a direction of travel, and that we're going to have to make a certain kind of effort to move along that. So we really need that. That's really important. But yeah, we can take it literally and have this sense that, well, I'll walk along that path for a little while, and then I'll be enlightened, or then it'll be done, or I'll be able to sort of I don't know, finish or something finally. And we can have a sense that either we can make that too near. We have a sense that I've just got to do this meditation technique for a little bit and then done and dusted, or it can have this sense of like, this is so lofty what it's trying to say. Like, I'm walking, and when am I going to get there? And it can feel disheartening in itself as well.
Could I add something?
Yeah, sure.
So for me, what came up was with the path is practice.
Mm-hmm.
So with practice, but I don't see practice as necessarily a fully linear thing.
Mm.
I compare it to my experience of learning Spanish,
Mm-hmm.
where, for example, I've been doing 30-minute lessons every single day for the past 3 months or so, and I made tremendous amount of progress. And I have coworkers which I could speak to in Spanish, and I was able to have this really advanced talk about politics and history. But then it came to describing my weekend, and that really was incredibly hard for some reason, because a lot of the advanced vocabulary is exactly the same in Spanish and English.
Right.
And I kind of compared it to my Buddhist practice, where sometimes in a meditation I could, feel these deeper states of meditation, and it could feel quite easy. But on another day, even a really basic practice of just focusing on the breath could feel immensely hard.
Yeah,
So even though it's practice, it's somewhat not fully linear, where of course over time it's more of an upward trajectory, but there's a lot of highs and lows.
Yeah.
But overall it's worth it, because I know eventually the highs will get higher and the lows would have a lower threshold.
Yeah,
That
there'll be a
makes
change, but
Yeah.
it's not as simple as it's easy to have this sense that there's a path. I'm gonna walk along it, and then I'm going to be get to this point, where it can be quite disheartening if you feel like, God, I've been meditating for years, and that was just an awful meditation. Surely I've sort of, if we're taking the path metaphor too literally, we can think, oh my God, I've just jumped back and I've sort of lost all that time or something. So there's ways in which it can kind of break down, as you say. There's something a bit more, something not so linear, and the path is completely linear, isn't it? Okay, so that's a little bit on the path. And then something on the goal. So the goal, as you were saying, the goal is something that's attained out of time. So the goal is sort of equates to what the goal is eternal in the way that we were talking about before the break. The goal is the thing that can glut the heart. The goal has got this is sort of, it's eternal. Language really starts to fall apart here. So if the bodhisattva is one who's constantly moving towards enlightenment, the Buddha is one who has attained it. The Buddha is therefore the goal. You could say that the Buddha therefore, in a full sense, is beyond time. I'll read you a little quote from the Diamond Sutra, which is one of the sort of the perfection of wisdom text, which is part of the sort of the wisdom tradition within the Mahayana. And this is the person speaking in the Diamond Sutra here is the Buddha, and he says, "Those who by my form did see me," which form meaning the sort of historical human body, "those who by my form did see me, and those who follow me by voice, wrong the efforts they engaged in. Me, those people will not see. From the Dharma one should see the Buddhas. From the Dharma bodies come their guidance. Yet Dharma's true nature cannot be discerned, and no one can be conscious of it as an object." So Dharma, in this sense, being the truth that the Buddha realised, and the truth that he tries to communicate. He's saying that from the Dharma one should see the Buddhas. So that's pointing at the fact that you've got the Buddha, as in terms of once upon a time there was a sort of someone you could sort of point at or look at, who was people called the Buddha, and you could go and meet once upon a time. There's the historical Buddha, the flesh and blood Buddha in that sense, but he's saying that's not really the Buddha in the full sense. The Buddha is, to see the Buddha you need to see the Dharma, you need to have an experience of the eternal in order to really see who the Buddha is in the fullest sense. Yeah. So so the Bodhisattva is within time, moving towards the goal, and the Buddha is sort of on the other side, in this other dimension, the goal sort of eternally realised. So in that sense, if the Buddha is eternal in that sense, then one can't quite say that there was no Buddha and then there was a Buddha. In one sense, like beyond time entirely, there's a sort of perpetual Buddha. There's this completely limitless consciousness of the Buddha is something that, in a certain sense, has always been there and will always be there. It's always sort of within a hair's breadth. In a sense, we're always as near to enlightenment as we'll ever be. There's if you see what I mean. So that's another way of it's quite a different way of relating to Buddhism than we're walking on the path and we're walking. There's this sense that there's this consciousness, there's this Buddha consciousness, if you like, that is eternally present. It's always there. It's just there for us just to notice, and it will always have been there. The danger of that is that if we take that as our myth and we think, I'm not walking on a path then, enlightenment sort of it's here and now. The danger of that is that we don't really make an effort, and it might be, that might be true, but it'll just be an abstract idea for us. So somehow we're needing to kind of bring together these two different ways of looking at things. This one in which we're making an effort and moving towards something, and this perspective in which it's already eternally here. So the issue is that the path and the goal, in this sense, are discontinuous. You don't walk along the path and then arrive at enlightenment. It's as though they're in completely different dimensions. Like, one dimension is just a line. So you've got a one-dimensional. If you extend a one-dimensional line longer and longer and longer and longer, it doesn't become a two-dimensional image. There's something. It's of a completely different dimension. So you can't just walk the path, keeping on going in time, extend time out, many kalpas, more and more practice, and then suddenly you get to the golden gate of Buddhahood. It's not quite like that. There's a dimension shift that we're looking at here. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be walking the path as well. So we find ourselves in a true paradox, and there can be a temptation just to be like, ugh, which is it? And we can be tempted to say, well, time is just an illusion. So you sort of merge time into an idea of eternity. But that's too easy. And similarly, you can be like, well, eternity is just an idea, an abstract idea, so let's just merge that back into time. But actually, it's as though there are these two dimensions, and in our practice, we need to sort of find some way of realising both almost simultaneously. The fact that there's a kind of an ongoing effort of practicing, perfecting, applying ourselves, and a sense that reality is just is ever present, and we're trying to bring these two completely different dimensions of reality into relation to one another. So in a way, we're trying to realise the principle of we're trying to realise bodhisattvahood and realise Buddhahood simultaneously. These two principles are kind of a sort of static and a dynamic kind of principle, reality as it exists outside of time and reality as it is progressively realised more and more within time, if you see what I mean. So, so what do we do with that? There's a paradox there. There's a mystery there. The Zen tradition has this image of climbing up a flagpole, and you climb up the flagpole and you get to the top, and then you can't come down because the Zen master's there ready to hit you with a stick. So that's not an option. But you can't sort of jump off and fly, and there's no more flagpole to climb up. So sort of what do? A paradox takes us right against the edge of our understanding. And as we get to the edge of our understanding, other faculties have to kind of take over. And it'll be something of the nature of intuition and imagination that can carry us beyond that. The Buddha's teaching, it doesn't negate reason, but it will take us beyond the reaches of reason. Reason might take us to the top of the flagpole, but it's not going to carry us beyond. So this is where a sense of magic, of wonder, of unknowing, of a sort of and a sense of beauty perhaps with that comes to the fore and becomes the kind of mode with which we need to engage with these deepest truths of what it is to be alive. So what do you have a sense of that, either in kind of practicing or in reflecting on your life, or have you sort of found it? What are the conditions that you've found that have thrust you into a state of wonder? A state of wonder, of awe, of unknowing. Can anyone think of an example of being in that state, and what kind of brought that about?
I think I've got one which isn't as glamorous as that, but when I was working as a student, I was working too hard and I was fixated on the goal. And I remember once getting to a moment where I just had to just stop. You know, I sort of had a mini breakdown, in my own mind, and I remember thinking, right, I just have to give up. I can't do this. There's too much pressure. And then I got up the next day and just carried on. But there was a letting go. Essentially, my ego had frustrated itself enough to stop objectifying the destination, and then I was able to just be the student and participate and just be in the now in a sort of timeless state. And then obviously everything went fine, but for me the path was sort of in the way, and it just had to kind of frustrate the idea of itself out of me.
Yeah, great. That's really well put. In the sense, you're motivated. That's a really positive thing because it's going to get you acting towards a goal, and then at some point you just kind of it's not going to cross a line. There's something else that needs to come into the picture, and so that moment of being up against it, when you really sort of feel like you're at the end of your resources, that can be really, really fruitful. Something can change, but it's not going to be just by doing more of what you've been doing. It's like another dimension needs to come into the picture. So I think that's a sort of, perhaps a more on the mundane level, a kind of correspondence to what we're talking about here.
Yeah, so this is from earlier this fall. I was at a cabin and it was getting late and I wanted to go on a hike before the day was over. And for some reason everything was just perfect. Conditions of the light, the feel of the air, the sound of the animals, and it wasn't a spectacular hike, it was a very quick one, but I got a feeling that I had been searching for years, hiking around in mountains and going to more spectacular places, but I never found it quite like I found it that evening, a sense of total peace, of awe, of transcendence, And I realized, I think the reason was because I wasn't searching for it. That particular day, it was just, I'm just going to go on a quick hike. I wasn't expecting anything. And that's kind of when it happened.
Right. But in a sense, what it sounds like happened before that was that you'd been looking for, you'd been making an effort to find places that are beautiful and to hike and to go have experiences and so on. So there's a kind of momentum in a certain direction that has enabled a moment where something else relaxes, and only then can something else come into the picture. So there can be something a bit like that. That's why when we meditate, we put on all this, we were doing mindfulness breathing earlier, we put on this effort to follow the breath, etc. And then there's this moment at the end, which is really important, and actually we could do for longer, where we stop making an effort to follow the breath, but we stay there, and we just sit, and we're not making an effort anymore. And that sometimes can be when the meditation really takes off. Yeah. Anything else? Any other experience of wonder or? Yeah.
I remember as a child, maybe I was like about 12 or 13 years old, and I grew up in a very small village in the northwest of England. I remember looking out of the window and feeling this sense of sadness that I was in this place, and I knew that there was nothing in this place that was going to fulfill me. And obviously I had my mum and I loved my mum and stuff, but when I was 18 I left home, and people really don't know this so much about me, but the reason that I left home and I came to London wasn't because of, looking for prosperity or looking for, partner or anything. I wanted adventure, and I never had a sense of fear. And this has been it's been a blessing and a curse, but because my life has been I threw myself into London, and I just had the most craziest wonderful experiences and the most craziest awful experiences, and and I try and take everything from each experience, and now I'm kind of wanting to go onto a path of just being with myself and stopping this need for adventure, because the adventurous side of me is immense, and finding this moment where I can be here and be safe and just I'm trying to take the opportunities that are coming my way, and I can see. I did walk, I don't know if anyone said of the Camino de Santiago, but I walked that from Ponferrada in
That's
Spain
a long path.
a couple of years ago, and I took from that the yellow arrows that are painted along the way to show you the way to walk to reach your destination, which is the cathedral in Santiago de Compostela. And I take from that in life. I still look and I still see the arrows, and I try to follow those and
Great.
trust in hopefully it will guide me to a safe and to a peaceful place.
Great. And that spirit of adventure is something not to lose, I think, especially because that can be a real motivator. That can be a kind of a sort of a fire that's driving us towards something, and that can take us down all sorts of different turnings and so on. But there's something of that, I think, in looking into life more deeply, rather than necessarily looking through sort of experiences and things that we sort of get a sense of. Actually, if we look deeper and deeper and deeper into life, it can be a real journey of discovery in itself. And a sense of excitement of that, and that being an adventure, can really drive us on as well. Okay. So this sense of wonder, of magic, the Buddhist tradition uses this phrase "emao," which is a sort of expression of just wonder. It's like in relating to these teachings, come at it from this place of wonder, of I really don't know. The more, in a way, that I found, the more I've practiced Buddhism, in a way, the less certain I am of myself and my ideas and what I think about the world. And that feels like a good place to start. It's just to sort of knock away all the kind of false certainties that we've sort of inherited from the world around us, and open ourselves up to something much larger. And there's a kind of lightness that can come with that. In a moment we'll do the we've got an image of Green Tara on the shrine, and we'll chant Green Tara's mantra in a moment. So Green Tara is one of these. When we talk about bodhisattvas here, when you hear the word, quite often we'll be talking about a bodhisattva like Green Tara or Avalokiteshvara or Manjushri, or these sort of archetypal bodhisattva figures. And there are archetypal Buddha figures, like this is actually a representation of the Buddha Amitabha. So we've got archetypal Buddhas and archetypal bodhisattvas, and they can seem very similar to one another. And in a sense they are. You could say that a bodhisattva like Green Tara is a Buddha in bodhisattva form. In a way, it's like a synthesis of these two principles: the Buddha principle outside of time, and the bodhisattva principle constantly developing more and more, never ceasing, never settling down. These two qualities kind of coming together. And you have this in the image of Green Tara. She sits with one foot up in meditation and one foot stepping down into the world. So there's this sense of a kind of stepping back from the rough and tumble of life into something completely at peace, eternal. If time is impermanent and changing, then the eternal would be there'd be a sense of complete stability and rest, a sort of complete unshakable quality. So that's on one hand, on one leg rather. She's in meditation, in sort of immersed in the eternal, and the another leg steps forward out into the world, into the sort of cut and thrust of time and suffering and so on, to respond, to keep following a path of being able to respond more and more with courage, with just giving freely of ourselves, with trying to resonate with life and alleviate suffering, and growing through doing so. So there's this twin motion that's happening and kind of encapsulated in the one figure, and that's true of all these bodhisattva figures. And they form a kind of these archetypal images kind of form a bit of an intermediary between the Buddha as flesh and blood, who we can't sadly meet anymore, and this ineffable Buddha that is eternal. There's a sort of an intermediary point where we can engage with an image. Tara is she's green. She's the colour of emerald. She's made of light. She's not someone we can sort of meet in the ordinary sense, in the having tea or whatever. But she's like somewhere between human form and personality as we know it, and the eternal. And by engaging imaginatively, we open that door of wonder into something much more that we can relate to. So what we'll do to finish is I'll read another text that talks about this paradox that we've been talking about. It's from a meditation practice for a different figure. But I'll read that. We'll sit quietly in meditation, just absorb that, and then I'll start the Green Tara mantra. We'll evoke Green Tara. We'll end in this spirit of Amo, this spirit of wonder, of unknowing, and call on the qualities of Green Tara. The mantra will die down, and then that will be the end of our evening. Amao, Dharma wondrous strange, profoundest mystery of the perfect ones. Within the birthless, all things take their birth, yet in what's born, there is no birth. Amao, Dharma wondrous strange, profoundest mystery of the perfect ones. Within the ceaseless, all things cease to be, yet in that ceasing, nothing ceases. Amao, Dharma wondrous strange, profoundest mystery of the perfect ones. Within the non-abiding, all abides, yet thus abiding, there abideth naught. Amao, Dharma wondrous strange, profoundest mystery of the perfect ones. In non-perception, everything's perceived, yet this perceiving's quite perceptionless. Amao, Dharma wondrous strange, profoundest mystery of the perfect ones. In the unmoving, all things come and go, yet in that movement, nothing ever moves. Om Tare, Ti Tare, Tire Swaha. 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 Om Tare, Ti Tare, Right. So that's all we've got time for tonight. So we could put our mats and cushions away and I'll have this easy.
Thank you.